talking to Carl Gipson. Carl, tell us where you're from.
I am from Washington Policy Center in Seattle, Washington.
Okay, and you're here at the 2010 Consumer Electronics Show. And today there was a big speech by Julius Janikowski, the chairman of the Federal Communications Commission.
Sure.
Very well attended in a dual-sized hall to accommodate everyone. What were your impressions of the Q&As, particularly the questions that he was asked?
Yeah.
I thought they were very pointed, and the answers that he gave.
Well, Janikowski is a very engaging person, very charming. Unfortunately, I don't think he really did a great job of answering questions specifically. And granted, there were some of the questions he was asked. He certainly didn't know, and he acknowledged that. But I kind of felt like I was watching more of a campaign speech where you deal in generalities and not in specifics. And some of the folks here who are in the consumer electronic industry, they're okay with generalities, but those of us in the kind of the policy world, we need some more specifics. I'm not sure. I think that's what he. I think it was fine for the vast majority of the audience, the way he answered some of these questions on net neutrality, on regulations, and I really liked one of the questions was, okay, well, if you have ubiquitous broadband access, throughout the nation, will you then repeal a lot of these regulations that you're talking about? And he didn't answer the question, which makes me worried because, when has government ever said, okay, enough's enough, we've accomplished our goals, we're now going to pull back on the regulatory system and free up the market, free up the competitors. I don't think that's really ever happened, particularly on a federal level, and I think a lot of us are worried that won't happen once we get to this more ubiquitous stage of broadband connectivity that he's talking about. So I think there are certain things that the FCC is doing that needs to be done as far as let's figure out who has what and where, what's competitive and what's not. Even though I think sometimes they're dabbling on the line of what's within their jurisdiction, but I think it's good to have a conversation as long as they don't think that you can just by legislating turn a corner and have this ubiquitous connectivity and people playing fair. You can't just legislate this stuff as a wish list. So Janikowski's speech was interesting. That's for sure. And it was standing room only, so I'm glad I was there. This whole conference has been a little overwhelming, but it's been a lot of fun. And so I'm looking forward to see what happens over the next couple of months when the FCC rolls out their broadband plan. I think it'd be very interesting.
Great. And Daryl Issa was here. We're at one of the last events of the day as far as legislation is concerned. It was the Legislative Outlook 2010.
Yeah.
What were some of the things that Issa talked about that struck you?
I think in regards to net neutrality, the thing I really took away from that was that Congress can't make a rule that doesn't favor one side or the other. And I hadn't really heard anybody put it quite so succinctly. I think it was brilliant. So when you start talking about things like, well, how do we legislate neutrality? You can't, and we shouldn't try. And it just the number of unintended consequences that come about from legislation like net neutrality, I think are profound and would impact the internet and our desire for this ubiquitous connectivity that everyone's talking about to in a negative sense. So I'd never heard Representative Issa before. I liked a lot of what he had to say. There were some concerns, once they're in the minority right now, and once he takes the majority, I want to make sure that, if that actually happens in 2010, that the Republicans don't also go too far on the regulatory aspect. He's talking about having subpoena powers and all this other power. Absolute power corrupts, as they say. So, I do like some of the things he was talking about of kind of pulling back, or maybe not so much pulling back, but stopping moving forward on regulation, on net neutrality, on the Comcast deal, making sure that FCC and the regulatory bodies have absolute statutory authority to do any of this in the first place. And I think a lot of that is not being talked about right now. So, I thought it was a good session.
Great, Carl Gipson, thanks for joining us.
My pleasure.